It's quite a statement from the Pope, isn't it? A river of blood and tears as we try to continue to understand exactly what the latest is over in Eastern Europe between Russia and Ukraine at the moment. The Nelson Mandela Foundation has also weighed into the debate. A lack of leadership, you're going to tell us. Selo Hatang, CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Why do you say lack of leadership?
Good morning, Gareth. I think it's important that at a time like this, we don't just look at what's happening in Ukraine in terms of it's black or white. In other words, giving it the simplest answers to the most complex situation. I think on both ends, you find that on the one hand, you have the Russian government that has been making all kinds of claims about security. But it's clear that part of the problem is that it's about ownership. It's about wanting to take control of a country that's a sovereign state. It's about not wanting to let go in some instances. But do we have legitimate concerns sometimes that a country could have such legitimate concerns that it needs to take extra measures? On the one hand, on the other hand, you have the Ukrainians, the Ukrainian government that won't budge in terms of just listening to reason around, of course, depending on which side you're on, reason in terms of making sure that it becomes a buffer between NATO and Russia. And I think it's important that at a time like this, we need sober minds to say what has happened is wrong in terms of the attack itself, but the context with which it happened can be understood. And I think if we are to look at it closely, we need to also be looking at what are the hands of the West that are in there, who could be adding a voice that can be heard at a moment like this, and not sacrifice citizens as we are seeing happening at the moment. The irresponsible arming of citizens is a point of concern. And like the Pope says, once a citizen has a gun, you become fair game for an army. And I think that's where the part of the problem that we have at the moment.
And it's clear that the Nelson Mandela Foundation has the view on this as well, but it seems South Africa's government doesn't. We've abstained from the vote in the UN Security Council as well. I mean, it's essentially sitting on the fence, isn't it? Surely we should have a stronger stance as a country on this, as a government.
Well, you know, there has been some... and I'm not a spokesperson for government, as you know, so it's for government to defend its position. But I think there's something that we have observed where you have what I would call bullying. You are either with us or you are against us. And you'd remember in 2003, we had the same kind of situation when the US was invading Iraq. They divided the world into two. They said you are either with us and you must then vote accordingly, or you are against us. And when Matiba angrily reacted the way he did about lack of leadership back then, we're seeing it again now. And we've been urging the South African government to at least show its hand in terms of making sure that being a member of BRICS counts. And I think if we are to do that, in other words, being seen to be doing demonstrable actions, taking demonstrable actions to see that the two sides get to at least the negotiating table. There are those who have given up on negotiations, by the way, Gareth. And it's not time now to negotiate, to give up on negotiations. If anything, we're saying it should be intensified. And if the South African government could do something like that, we'd see some action that can be done by their counterpart being Russia. Another thing that is of concern, and you reported on it earlier on, is of the plight of the Africans in Ukraine. And we're sitting here with shock, horror, anger at how racism, even at a point like this, can still be showing its hand. You know, Gareth, nothing makes me so angry because I loathe racism. And I think if you are to find yourself in a moment like this, where you find instead of people being in solidarity, you then see that the color kicks in. But when it comes to the vote of Africans, it's demanded at the UN, it's demanded everywhere. And I think we need to then be making sure to say we must see Europe coming strongly again also on this question of racism. I'm not equating racism to the loss of life. Loss of lives are really, really sad. And we are saying that's something that we should all be saying it should stop.
Let me ask you this as a final brief question to you, Sello, the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. What would Madiba have done if he was here now and still the president?
I never want to speak for Madiba, Gareth, as you know. I've avoided that all the time. But we can look at what his track record said in the past. And you'll remember 2003 moment that I just referred to. When Ken Saro-Wiwa was killed, in Nigeria, Madiba stood on his own against the majority, and when there was a time for conflict to be stopped, he sent envoys to say there's demonstrable action that has been taken. And I think Madiba would have taken something that we can say, here is leadership that's being seen. And I think he would have not only been calling on President Vladimir Putin, but you'd also be calling on NATO to say you are also part of the problem. Once you give arms, you are then making the Ukrainians even more vulnerable to attack. Let's stop with arming. Instead, let's try to then stop the war. And I think that's where Madiba, I suspect Madiba would have been. And I'm saddened by what's happening there. And I'm hoping that leadership will kick in to say, well, let's do our best to stop the flow of blood, because it will hurt many more to come, generations to come. It affects us here in Africa in terms of food prices, in terms of fuel prices, so we can't stand idle and not say anything at the point like this.
Yeah, idleness is not going to assist anybody, not in Ukraine, not in Russia, certainly not in Africa as well. Sello Hatong, Nelson Mandela Foundation CEO, as always, I appreciate your time.